When it comes to seeing Liz Miele, whose opener was Neil Rubenstein, it's if you've seen her past specials, it's pretty much a progression from what you've seen before in terms of her talking about relationships, her families, her cats, and also some of the odd ongoings of her life, especially when it comes to dealing with other comedians and cultures. But to summarize, when it comes to both Liz and also Neil, they're an odd match at first since Neil's covered in tattoos, comes off like a bouncer for a bar, which he openly says, but then he comes off very soft-spoken, and on top of that, he likes to make jokes about death in a way that maybe not everybody will find funny, but he likes to be macabre a little bit. I don't want to say controversial because he is not that interesting, but he definitely leans toward let's see what makes people uncomfortable but could also be funny. As for Liz, she's more so funny best friend, talking about odd things that happen in her life, or else the odd people in her life. Like she talks about her boyfriend who looks like Neil, covered tattoos, stuff like that. But he also has hooks in him. He likes to be like pulleys on him, and it's one of those things that kind of make you raise an eyebrow. And she, like Neil, recognizes some of the odd situations, people and things in their life. But with her being a woman and also someone who doesn't necessarily seem like she would be part of that world, the juxtaposition just makes things even more awkward and weird, but also funny in a way. And that's pretty much the vibe you'll get from both of their sets. Odd, awkward, kind of weird, but funny at times because of the way they position their stories about these different things. So, first highlight has to be when I went to their show on the 15th, they had a heckler. And for Neil, the heckler kind of got warmed up because he was someone who was conservative. And Neil he's not gay. He does slightly read that when you first meet him, but when he talks about girlfriend and the type of porn that he likes, because that's a topic of interest for him, he's very much clearly straight. But he does mention certain things as a Jewish man, especially trying to help you understand why his last name is Rubenstein, that lead to a man in the back deciding he wanted to heckle. Neil handled it, made jokes about it, and we moved on. The man came back for a second round because one of the jokes that Liz tells deals with people she believes could have autism. And this is not a derogatory joke whatsoever, but the person in the back seemingly has a child with autism, and on top of that, they're not necessarily comfortable or was with that type of joke, or maybe they're not comfortable with the fact that their child has been recently, or they have a huge difficulty and they haven't found the humor in it yet. So with that, they decide to cause a scene. And the reason why I'm highlighting this is because I'm not used to hecklers when I go to comedy shows. I'm used to people who realize that audience work that the comedian does is not a full-on conversation and it goes on too long and they have to shut them down. I'm very used to that. But a heckler who was threatening violence, who was cursing at the comedian, and they having a back and forth, new thing for me. And watching how Neil handled it and then how Liz handled it, wonderful. Definitely felt like the venue should have had better security, like someone who looked like Neil, but a whole separate issue. We're not talking about the venue, we're talking about the set. Liz handled it, kind of had a little bit of a shook up because the guy was threatening violence on another patron, but once she got through that, made a few jokes about it, went right back into a set like it was nothing. Which leads to the second highlight, and that's just that when it comes to both, yes, what set off the heckler was Neil making a slightly political joke, and then when it comes to Liz, because she mentioned something about autism, but generally speaking, neither of these two are really that controversial. Neil is very much kind of weird guy. Jokes about death. He made jokes about porn. He made jokes about his family immigrating, having to change their last name. And also, he's someone that's big into wordplay when it comes to his jokes. So he's like a nerdy-ish kind of comedian. And then when it comes to Liz, she gives you slice of life jokes, stuff about the odd things her cats do, some weird thing that happened with her boyfriend. It's stuff that you can imagine in conversation at work that nobody can get written up for the most part. So if you're somebody who doesn't like to hear the same political humor, current events jokes over and over again because you already heard them somewhere else, as long as you're not like knee deep into what Liz has out there with her 3 or 4 specials, I believe, on YouTube, or the one that Neil has, I feel like this can feel fresh to you. With that said, Neil was our opening act for Liz, and it seems not for the whole tour that she's doing right now, but for quite a few dates, he's part of it. And one thing I wasn't really fond of when it comes to Neil, when he was bombing, at least it seemed like he was bombing because he was making it sound like to us he didn't switch things up and try to adjust. His set was his set. You didn't like his set? Okay, there's this one guy laughing here. All focus gonna be on him. The rest of y'all, he gets paid whether or not you laugh. He still has whatever minutes. And I kind of didn't like that because in my mind, if you're a comedian, the whole point is for you to get them to laugh. This isn't some type of bad school environment where if you get to one person, that's all that matters. These people paid to be here, and granted it wasn't a lot, it was like $40-$50, and I picked a reserved seat, so it's probably for general admission much less. But either way, sticking to a set that clearly isn't working, I feel like it's kind of messed up. And granted, you can always present the argument, Neil has a special out there, you can have seen what his comedy was before you got there. But even with that in mind, I feel like your comedy should adjust to the audience. The audience shouldn't always have to adjust to your comedy, especially if you're an opening act, because this is your introduction to a bigger audience, and why wouldn't you want to make the best impression? Then, in terms of on offense when it comes to Liz, there's nothing really huge that you can mention. Yes, like most comedians, when you see them on tour, there is a sense that you're seeing jokes that are kind of work in progress, still being polished, and while they have a solid hour worth of jokes, it may not be the best jokes. These might not be the jokes you'll see when they eventually film a comedy special, but that's kind of what happens when it comes to comedians. It's not like with musicians where it's the perfected version. They've been through the ringer, they know it's a hit, sing it, get off the stage. Comedians, you go into a show as basically supporting them so they can continue working on these jokes, so they can make a living, so that they can eventually perfect them, put out a special, then work on a new hour. And I would say, when it comes to seeing others, like we saw Ali Wong amongst other people, it can definitely feel a little bit more like they get more out of you than you get from them, because it can sometimes feel like a venting session. But when it comes to the way Liz handles things, she has a therapist. She's not using the audience in order to try to work things out. She's sharing stories, anecdotes, thoughts, feelings, whatever, to make you laugh. And with that, I didn't feel as much of I'm just getting to see a rough cut of your final special early. And rather, I felt more so like how I feel when I see Hassan Minhaj, in terms of I'm getting something that's quality. May not necessarily be the final product, but it's worth the ticket price. But overall, I would definitely say in terms of Liz, she's definitely worth seeing live. When it comes to Neil, I just feel like he's an acquired taste that I have no interest in acquiring. But even with that said, if she is in your area, definitely, I would say check her out. And if Neil's her opening act, it's a good time to focus on eating your food. Or the 2 tab minimum that most comedy clubs have.